The police told me my wife's boyfriend was dead before I knew my wife had a boyfriend. Both of those facts came through my front door on the same Sunday morning, about 40 seconds apart. 2 detectives, 1 photo, and 1 question. And 8 years of my marriage ended right there on the welcome mat. And the crazy part is, the murder was not even about her. Let me walk you through the whole thing from the knock. I am 41. My wife and I were married just over 8 years here in Texas. No kids. We tried for a while and it did not happen, and we stopped talking about it. She worked as a vet tech at an animal clinic about 10 minutes from the house. I do instrument work at plants. Decent money, decent house, decent marriage. That is what I would have told you back then. That Sunday morning, I was making coffee and she was still in her robe, and somebody knocked on the door like they meant it. You know the difference. A neighbor knocks, a cop knocks, 2 detectives. They showed the badges. They said the name of a man I had never heard of. I had no clue who this guy was, and they asked if either of us knew him. I said no, because I had nothing in me about that name. Nothing. My wife also said no. Then the one on the left took out a photo and held it up, and I looked at a total stranger, a big guy, sunburned, ball cap, standing next to a tailgate. I shook my head, and then I looked over at my wife to see if she recognized him. And I want you to understand, I was not suspicious. I was just doing what you do. You look at your wife so you can both shrug at the cops together. She was not shrugging. The detective watched her. They watch faces for a living. And then he said the sentence that cut my life in half. Ma'am, we have his phone records. We know the 2 of you spoke almost every day for the last 14 months. We are trying to figure out what kind of relationship you had with him. I am standing there in my doorway, holding a coffee I never got to drink, and a stranger with a badge knows something about my wife that I do not. That is how I found out. Not a text I found, not lipstick, not a friend who saw something. A homicide detective reading off a card in front of me on a Sunday. And I will tell you a number because the detective said it out loud in my living room, and it has been in my head ever since. Over 4,000 minutes. That is what the phone company had on the 2 of them. Calls alone, not counting the texts. 4,000 minutes is a number a man does not forget. I have replayed whole months of my life against that number. All those nights she sat on the phone in the car in the driveway, and I thought she was finishing a work call, and I used to wave at her through the windshield, through the glass like a fool at a phone call, because here is what I did not know yet. The man in the photo had been found 3 weeks earlier, shot in his truck at one of his job sites. He owned a landscaping company, and the reason 2 detectives were standing on my porch instead of calling on the phone is that when a married woman is calling a man who is no longer alive every day, they do not just have questions about her, they have questions about the husband. I did not understand that part yet. I was still standing in the doorway, stuck on 14 months. My wife had started crying, and not the kind of crying you do for a stranger. The detectives asked if they could come in, and I heard my voice say yes, and the 4 of us sat down in my living room, and I learned the story of my own marriage from 2 men I had met 90 seconds earlier. After they left that first morning, she followed me around the house trying to get in front of it, room to room. I did not say much. I got my keys and drove to my brother's place, and I told him the whole thing standing in his driveway. And my brother is not a soft man, and he didn't say anything, just stared at me. He said, "Stay here tonight." I said, "I cannot. I have to go back. It is my house." And that was the first time it hit me that the house was about to become the whole war. She met him at the clinic. He brought his dog in with an ear infection. That is the whole beginning. 14 months of my life traded away over a dog with an ear infection. The calls were on her drive to work and her drive home. Every day, both directions. There were lunches. There were two work conferences that I now know were not work conferences, and I sat there while a detective asked her about a hotel 3 hours away on dates I could have looked up in my own calendar, because one of those weekends I was at a plant, turnaround working nights, and calling her every break I got. She answered maybe half of what they asked. She kept looking at me sideways, and I could not figure out the look at first, and then I got it. She was not looking at me for help. She was checking what my face was doing with all of it. And then it got worse. And I need you to hear how it got worse, because this is the part nobody believes. The younger detective turned to me, real polite, and asked where I was the night of the 14th. It took me a full breath to understand what he was asking me, and then it landed. A man was murdered. My wife was involved with him. In their world, I am not the poor guy in the doorway. I am the number one guy. I am the husband with a motive, and the fact that I just found out means nothing, because every husband says he just found out. I have never been in trouble in my life. I signed whatever they asked. Phone, gone, take it. And I remember handing it over and thinking, take it. It is the only clean phone in this house. The night of the 9th, I was 300 miles away on a turnaround. Badge scans in, badge scans out, gate cameras, timesheets, a foreman who could put me in a unit at 2 in the morning. Clearing me was not quiet either. They called my foreman to walk the badge logs. They pulled the gate camera footage off the contractor. My foreman is a good man and he kept it tight, but a plant is a small town in hard hats. And by the time I was officially nothing to nobody, half my crew knew a homicide unit had been asking about me. Men I have worked beside for years were watching me eat lunch. One of them finally just asked me straight out, and I told him about the whole thing in the parking lot. And he stood there a second, and then he said, "Brother, you cannot write that. No, you cannot." It took them 9 days to formally clear me, and I want you to think about those 9 days. I am sleeping in my guest room. My marriage is dead. My wife cries all night one wall away. And somewhere in a file with my name on it, 2 men are checking whether I killed a landscaper I never met. While she was giving her full statement at the station 2 days later, I sat in my own driveway and finally looked the man up. The article called him a local business owner, shot in his truck, found by one of his own crew at sunrise. And then I found the obituary, and the obituary said, survived by his loving wife. Loving wife. I sat there with my thumb over that sentence for a while, and then I turned the phone off because there was nothing in there for me. The no she gave those detectives at my front door, by the way. They did not charge her over it, but the older one told me they wrote it down. My wife lied to 2 homicide detectives inside the first minute of knowing them, with her husband standing right there. Whatever else I tell you about her, keep that one in your pocket. She tried to explain that first night after the detectives left. She stood in the hallway and said it was never supposed to be anything serious. The man was dead and the police were at our door. We were past serious. I did not yell. I have thought about why, and the honest answer is that yelling is for when you think you can still fix something, and something in me already knew. I told her I wanted the whole truth once, start to finish, and whatever she told me now was the version I would believe forever. So choose carefully. And she told it, most of it. The rest came out in pieces over the next month, and every piece was worse than the one before it. The last piece was that he had been talking about leaving his wife. The man had a wife, and his wife had sat with the same 2 detectives and heard the same phone records in her own living room about my wife. There were 4 people in this thing, and the only 2 who never chose any of it were the 2 of us holding the door frames. Now, everybody asks the same question, so I will just answer it. No, his wife did not do it, and no, I did not do it. The police cleared both of us, and I will tell you at the end who actually did it, because they did catch him, and the reason turned out to have nothing to do with any of us. The man had a second business going out of that landscaping company, and it was not landscaping. He owed the wrong people money. That is it. That is what all of this was attached to: drugs and a debt. My marriage was collateral damage on a drug debt between two men I never met. Now, I have to tell you what living in that house was like after that, because we could not afford to split up. Not right away. The house had the both of us on it. The market was upside down for sellers that spring, and neither one of us could carry an apartment and half a mortgage at the same time. Every dollar we had was in that house. So, the woman I was divorcing moved into the guest room, and we lived like that in the same house for 5 months while it sold. You want to know what that looks like? It looks like a whiteboard on the refrigerator with grocery duty split by week. It looks like her Venmo requesting me $41 for her half of the electric bill from 30 feet away while we were still legally married. It looks like coming home from a 12-hour shift and eating standing up in the garage because she had a friend over in the living room consoling her. Hold that word, because I am about to tell you the part that made my own brother go silent on the phone. My wife was grieving him, her guy. She could not do it in public because nobody is allowed to know you loved a murdered man when both of you were married to other people. The widow gets the casseroles and the church and the line of hugs at the funeral. The mistress gets a guest room in the house of the husband she wrecked. So she grieved him in there at night, and I would hear it through the wall, and I would lie there in my own home, listening to my wife cry over another man's demise. I do not have a word for that. And then one morning she came out dressed nice and asked me if I thought it would be weird if she went to the funeral. I am not going to repeat what I said. It had been a month of biting everything back, and I did not bite that one back. She did not go. I found out later she drove to the cemetery 2 days after and stood out there alone. And you know what? Fine. Whatever that was, it was hers, and she did it where nobody had to watch. An unmarked car sat outside twice that first week, and unmarked cars are only unmarked to people who have never seen one. The lady across the street brought me a casserole on the second week. She did not know what to call what had happened at our house, and neither did we. But this is Texas, and in Texas, you bring food to it either way. I am not sure for everyone, though. I thanked her, and we both stood there not saying the thing, and that casserole fed me for 4 days in a garage. The widow called me once. That deserves its own minute, because it was maybe the strangest phone call of my life. She got my number off some paperwork, and she called on a Wednesday night, and she asked me flat out, "Did you know?" And I said, "No, did you?" And she said, "No." And then neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Two total strangers on a phone line, married into the same lie from opposite ends of it. Before she hung up, she said, "I am sorry about your wife." And I said, "I am sorry about your husband." And I have never spoken to her again. There was nothing else to say. We were the only two honest people in the whole thing, and there was nothing else left to say. I filed for divorce in month 2 of the guest room arrangement. Texas has a 60-day waiting period, and ours was delayed because of the house. And I will tell you something about divorcing in Texas under the 10-year mark. Spousal support never even came up. You basically need 10 years before that conversation starts, and we were under it, and she knew it and her lawyer knew it, so nobody even tried. Texas is community property, so the deal was simple. Sell the house, split the proceeds, each keep our own retirement, each keep our own car. Her lawyer tried exactly one creative idea, something about her needing transition support, and my lawyer shot that down right away, and that idea died right there. Selling a house you are both still living in is its own circus. The realtor knew the whole story by then. Everybody did, and she was decent about it, and she had one rule: both of should be gone during the showings. So twice a week, I would sit in my truck at the plant early, and she would go wherever she went, and strangers would walk through our separation with their shoes off, opening the closet in the master, opening the door to the guest room, having no idea they were looking at the two halves of a marriage laid out like a floor plan. The furniture we did with sticky notes, 2 colors. We walked the house on a Saturday morning and tagged 8 years of accumulation in about 90 minutes. And we did not argue over a single item. And if you think that sounds civilized, you are wrong. It was the opposite. You argue over things when the things still mean something. The house sold in the 5th month to a young couple expecting a baby. I mowed the yard the morning of the closing. I do not know why. It was not my yard anymore. And I stood there in the heat doing the edges like it mattered. And that was the last thing I ever did at that address. We signed at the title company 20 minutes apart because the lady there was kind enough to schedule it. So we did not have to sit at the same table. The wire hit 2 days later. Half a house, split clean down the middle. In the parking lot, the last time I ever saw her, she rolled down her window and said, "Take care of yourself." And I said, "You too." 8 years. And that is the last thing we ever said to each other. The older detective called me the day before the arrest hit the news. He did not have to do that. He said, "We have him. It will be public tomorrow. I wanted you to hear it from me." I thanked him. And then I asked him the question I had been holding for months, whether the man ever knew about me at all, whether my name ever came up in 14 months of those calls. The detective was quiet for a second, and then he said, "Son, I cannot read a dead man's mind, but if it helps, you were not the reason for anything." He is the only person in this whole story who ever said that to me. The man who killed him got arrested in month 7. I found out from a news alert standing in a gas station line, 3 people between me and the register. Somebody he owed money to, exactly like the detectives figured. Some dispute over product moving through the landscaping trucks. I went through the article twice, and I put the phone in my pocket, and I paid for my drink. And the kid at the register told me to have a good one, and I said, "I am working on it." He got 40 years at trial. The widow testified. My ex-wife, I am told, watched the coverage from her sister's place, where she was living by then. And the last thing, because people ask me this every time, they ask if I hate the guy, the dead man. He did not owe me anything. He never made me a single promise. All he did was answer his phone. The person who owed me was sleeping in my guest room, Venmo requesting me for the electric bill. The first night in the duplex, I slept 9 hours straight. I had not done that since the knock. Nobody was grieving through my wall. Nobody was Venmo requesting me anything. Last month, my badge got scanned into a new unit in a new town, 4 hours from that house. Different plant, different locker, different everything. There is a dog at the duplex I rent, left behind by the last tenant, and the landlord asked if I minded, and I did not mind. He waits by the door when I get home. Tony, thank you for what you do, brother. A lot of people can learn from these stories people share with you. I really can't fault OP for this one. His wife was probably good at hiding her affair, but there wasn't much she could really do when the cops started throwing out numbers. 4,000 calls, and one detective said, "Hey, I'm just trying to figure out what kind of relationship you had with this man that was unalived." And the reason why I said I'm not going to fault OP, when he found out, he didn't simp. He promptly filed for divorce. They split the rooms. They stayed in the house until the house sold, and he went about his merry way, and he kept it civil. That's the best way to do it. Never let your emotions dictate the outcome of a divorce, no matter what state you're in. Pay attention to the state you live in, because it may benefit you or it may not. In today's society, it's hard to tell them apart. You can have a church-going girl who looks really good. You can have a woman with a fat ass. Which one is going to betray you? You don't know. It's hard to tell them apart nowadays. Anyway, enough rambling. Until next time.